Track 67, Unit 9B.
Why are you particularly interested in the story of Martin Guerre?
Well, I belong to a group of historians who are interested in what's called microhistory. We focus on small single events in history because we believe you can learn more about a society from intensive study of these events. The story of Martin Guerre is a very strange one, and we microhistorians look out for that kind of unusual story, hoping it'll give us a better idea of what normal behaviour was during a particular period in history.
I see, that's interesting. So, can you just summarise the story?
Yes, of course. Martin Guerre was a French peasant who lived in a village called Artigat, in the southwest of France. This was in the early 16th century. He was the eldest son in a family of 6, and he got married very young, in his teens in fact. At the age of 21, he and his wife, Bertrande, had a baby son. But a few years later, he was caught stealing grain from his father's grain store. Fearing a severe punishment, theft was considered the worst type of crime in those days. He fled over the border to Spain, and having spent some time doing various jobs, he eventually joined the Spanish army. In 1557, he was wounded in battle, and his leg had to be amputated.
And his family?
Yes, so in the meantime, Bertrande was left at home not knowing what had happened to her husband, and unable to remarry because no one knew if Martin was dead or alive. Then, one day, and this is where the story becomes interesting, one day, a man professing to be Martin Guerre appeared in the village to claim the family estate. Given that Martin's father had already died, the house and land now legally belonged to his eldest son.
So this wasn't the real Martin Guerre?
No, the man was an impostor called Arnaud de Thiel. Yet the incredible thing is that Bertrande and the rest of the family accepted him as the real Martin Guerre. It was only Martin's uncle, Pierre, who was in charge of administering the estate, who didn't believe him. And he took the case to court to prove that Arnaud was a fraud.
Why did Bertrande do that? She must have known it wasn't her husband.
We don't really know. Perhaps having waited so long, she was just glad to have someone to support her again financially.
And what was the outcome of the case?
Well, Arnaud lost the first case, but he appealed and the case went to a higher court. He thought he had succeeded in persuading the judges that he was Martin Guerre, until the real Martin Guerre, complete with wooden leg, appeared in the court and told his story. For Arnaud, the game was up, and that was the end of his deception.